You're listening to the Future Tech Health Podcast with Richard Jacobs. Until I reached age 40, I never realized the obvious, that we all have medical issues, or we at least have a family member or close relation that had, has, or will have them in the future. Medicine and biological systems are the final frontier. Until we've conquered death, figured out how life began, cured cancer, and understood our purpose in the universe, there's a heck of a lot to talk about when it comes to our health. Future Tech Health means I'll be covering futuristic topics that are actually already in clinical trials, or even starting to appear on shelves or by prescription, or available for your own use. We dive deep into stem cells, CRISPR-Cas9, the science of sleep, epigenetics, medical testing, cancer, ketogenic diets, stem cells, aging, regenerative medicine, and more. My goal for you, the listener, is to learn from these podcasts. You may very well learn something that may change the course of your life for the better, steer you towards a new career, or give you insight into addressing a serious medical problem. Remember, however, this podcast and its content is informational in nature only. No medical, tax, legal, financial, or psychological advice is being given. If you enjoyed the podcast, please listen, subscribe, like, and share it with friends. Thank you.
Hello, this is Richard Jacobs with the Future Tech and Future Tech Health podcast. I have Volodymyr Koman. He's a postdoc at MIT in Boston. We're talking about cell-sized robots that can sense their environment, which sounds pretty cool. So, Volodymyr, thanks for coming. How you doing?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Richard. I'm really excited to share about this field that we are inventing, that we are working on.
Yeah, is there a name? Is it nano machines, or what would be the name of this size of robot, or are they just cell size?
Right. So it gets into the philosophy, right? What is the robot, and there were a lot of actually works around that some people just calling their swimming nanoparticles being a robots. But we really want to differentiate from those, and we call our machines as colloidal state machines. So colloidal is because they form a stable solution, and state machine is actually a concept which is a prototype of the robot. So it's like a very simple robot which has several states on board. And this is really different because we have our state machines doing computations on board of the particle, rather than having these many puppets that are floating inside the solution and are controlled by some eye in the sky type of machinery.
Okay, so what is the average size of a human cell, and what are the average size of the robots? Are they literally the same size, or are they just within the ballpark, within an order of magnitude?
Yeah, they are literally the same size. So the cells are from the 10 to 100 microns, and our robots are, again, we started from 100 microns, and now we are scaling it down to 50 to 10 microns. So it's really the same, and we actually are drawing the inspiration from the cells, because I myself is an engineer, and as we were building smaller and smaller machines working with nanotechnology, we were really fascinated by nature, right? And by the things that nature does, and we saw that even by our latest advances, we cannot actually beat nature. And so that's where we started to have these questions. Can we actually think similarly to nature? Can we have these kind of small machines that are the size of the cells, and then we will take it from there. Because there are different cells in nature, right? Some of them form tissues, and of course, this is one of the goals that we have, is to form bigger and bigger structures. But the other way is you have some cells that are actually swimming in your bloodstream, right? And they are controlling something. So this is the initial points, the initial direction that we are taking with our state machines that are mimicking these kind of cells.
Do you, through your experimentation, do you believe that cells are a sweet spot in terms of size? I think we all know and respect nature that it's very smart. So again, do you think that 50 to 100 microns, or 10 to 50 micron size range. Does that appear to be a sweet spot in terms of functionality? Or do you want to keep pushing and going smaller and smaller?
Yeah, we want to get it pushing and go smaller and smaller, but currently it's a sweet spot. Then it has to do with some insights that we discovered, in this field. And actually, if you look at this field of micro robotics and the fields of our state machine, this micrometer size, you have two different industries that we discovered are not actually talking to each other. One is electronics. So currently, you can do very very small electronic parts, and for example, your phone, your car has integrated circuits that are much smaller than cells, right? But then the problem that you cannot make these kind of circuits being autonomous at the size of microscale is because of the power. So they become very energy thirsty, and your battery becomes really really big. And on the other hand, you have this field of colloidal particles. So a lot of people are familiar with works in drug release and therapeutics, where you have these capsules that are being releasing some things into our body, and this is done not by electronics. Well, the smaller part of it is not done by electronics, but actually by material properties of these micro and nanoparticles. And these turns out this field, it turns out to be very very efficient, and they can scale very very well. But the problem is that they are very limited in their functions, right? If I want to build in electronics, if I want to scale electronics to hundreds and millions of transistors, I can easily do it by just repeating them. I cannot like add the functionality to my particle, material science particle, that it would have some modular structure. And so it turns out there is a trade-off between the materials and electronics. And what we are doing now, we are merging these two. And it turns out that this size of micrometer scale is actually a sweet spot for now, where we can use some electronic components and then in our state machines, and then also take advantage of some material science approaches, borrowing them from drug delivery and personalized medicine approaches, and we can combine all of this at the micro scale. Yeah.
So what's the structure of one of your typical cell-sized machines? I know we're talking about it instead of showing pictures, but can you try to describe it, what the structure looks like generally?
Yeah, definitely. So we have a recent work, and it was really the first publication of this kind of state machines, where we talk about the modularity, and that we want to have a circuit that you can, then later on easily expand on. And so our particle has three elements so far. One is the photo detector, and it serves a function as the power generator on board of the particle. So if you shine light on the particle, this photodiode absorbs light, and then it generates some current inside the circuit. The second element is the sensor. We wanted our particle to sense the environment. So and the third element is the memory. So we figure out that one element that is really hard to do with current material science works is a memory. So what our particle is doing is that it swims in the environment. You shine light on it, and it charges up, and then when it encounters certain chemicals that are analyte, it will store the information about this analyte into the memory, on board memory, and later on we can retrieve this particle and read what is happening on board.
Oh, so okay. So how would these be put into the body? By injection, and then they'd have to be pulled out by filtering the blood, or how do they go in and out?
Well, yeah, body is one direction, which everybody is talking about, but we realize that there are a lot of other directions. I would like just to highlight a few. Like one is really the problem of going to some really inaccessible places that have very high temperature, for example, or high pressure, like biochemical reactors. And then the other systems are these extended pipelines where you have leaks. You have to inject these particles there, and actually people have these problems, but nobody is thinking about the solution because there is no solution, no alternative nowadays. For in terms of the body, well, we view body as this kind of enclosed system. So yeah, we can inject them into the body. First direction that we are working is digestive tract, because it's sort of a little bit bigger. For the bloodstream, you need around 10 microns particles. And so as you inject them into the digestive tract, you can actually later on just simply excrete them and read out the information. So this is like the initial vision, but later on we want to have a network of these particles, and so that they can communicate between each other and also communicate to some, we call it eye in the sky, so something that is outside of the body, right? So if the particles, let's say, found something, they would amplify this signal, communicate, maybe collect several particles together, and then they send out the signal outside.
Well, why not have a passive device? Let's say, you put it against the carotid artery in your neck, for 30 seconds, and enough of the particles will flow by that time that it can get a readout from the particles. Maybe now I'd say, 3 or 4 millimeters away from them physically as they flow by, but maybe that would require a low enough power that you could read them without them having to amplify any signal very much. Maybe that's the way to do it.
Yeah, definitely. This is like the first direction. But the ultimate goal is to really read out the signals down to the single cell level. So imagine if you have these kind of small particles, right? We are talking about microns, so they can really go cell by cell. And if we have really hundreds and thousands of them, right? Every particle can go on a separate cell, and they can communicate between each other, and then maybe they can do simple tasks. Because it's not only about the communication. What is really different about our particles is a computational power. So you want to send something, then you want to compute. So you have some certain built-in program, and based on this program, based on the outcome, you want this particle, this machine to do something. And imagine this kind of distributed network of these things. It's like Internet of cells at the single cell level. We all know the benefits of the internet, that it's really made a great connection because you can exchange information very easily, right? Different people can talk to each other, which they are very far away. And so imagine if you have these kind of also signals going between cells, between tissues, and we are not limited by wires now, right? We have very different topologies of things happening inside our bodies and so on. So this is like our ultimate vision.
It seems like it's going to be very important to get the right morphology, the right shape of these machines. Again, following nature. Nature doesn't make squares or rectangles, really. It makes, round disc or donut or spherical type stuff. From what it sounds like, these are like chips, little square or rectangle chips. So will you have to round the corners? Will you try to make them shaped like cells?
Yeah, interestingly enough, as you go smaller, everything becomes softer. And so it's like if you have very thin, even layer of metal, it becomes bendable. And so, our current solution is electronics on top of this polymer substrate, so it's really bendable already. But as we scale down, this won't be really a drawback because everything will become softer and softer, and the circuits will become more bendable and bendable. So this will be good. And as we will be gaining from this is that we can also, change the shape of these and actuate them. So maybe as they travel to the point of interest, they travel as the tube that is rounded, and then as they arrive, they would open up into like a flowers open up. They will roll up and they will take much bigger area so that the signals will be much easily being picked up and so on. But I think the main message is that what we are learning now is that these machines will look very different from our current machines and also from our cells. Because what many people don't realize is that, and if you like, you Google the machine or nano robot or something in your Google search, what you will see is this ugly needles machines where people will just scale the machines down. Whatever you see in their real macro world, they scale them down and just put it in the bloodstream. But it turns out what we are learning is that the scaling rules, these interactions have really different scaling rules in terms of size. So certain interaction and certain forces at the macro scale and nano scale will have very different impact. For example, if you want to attach something at the macro scale, right, you need to have a glue, or you need to have a Velcro, or you need to have a zipper. At the micro and nano scale, everything is very, very sticky. So a lot of materials just stick to each other just because of the so-called van der Waals interaction, right? And then you have very opposite problem, how to make things unsticky at the micro scale, and so on. And so, like, these robots will look very differently. Surely we will take some things from nature because nature does it very well, but then we want to expand these things to very other different applications, right? So we will need to have creativity and really new ideas, new generation of scientists working and thinking about these state machines and really this robotics at this micro scale and nano scale. So this is really exciting.
Yeah, that's really interesting. What size would they need to be to navigate the bloodstream, and then to go into the interstitial fluid between cells, and then maybe even to go into the cells themselves to get through the membrane?
Right. It turns out, where we started with we were initially developing in nanosensors. So these are very simple microparticles that actually go inside the cells and even inside the organelles. And what they do, they have only one mission. They sense and they report signal out. So you shine the laser on them and they report signal out. And from there we had this vision, oh, why can we do something else? And that's how we came up with the state machine, saying state machine not only senses, but it computes and actuates. And so there are already some ideas on how to go inside the cells and how to go into organelles. The question really to the field now is to how to get these components in place and together that would perform at this scale, right? Because there were many failures, and we need really new solutions and new approaches, because it's not like so much easier that you just go into the store and you just buy these components. What we figuring out is that you cannot really have multiple functions or multiple elements at this scale. So you have to be sort of very creative. And one direction that we are working in is called distributed networks. So this is very similar from the computer engineering. And what happens here is that we are asking the question of what kind of minimal functions can one particle have, so that multiple particles, when coming together and following the array of same rules, will have much more complex behavior. So it's the concept that is called emergent behavior concept, and you can see this in nature, for example, in ants. Right? When ants, they are following very simple rules, but then when they need to do something, they can form these kind of bridges. They can sacrifice one for the whole colony and so on. And so the question here is, we are trying to bring this also into this field, is like, what would be the minimal function of one particle, so that the collection of these particles can do even greater things and so on.
What about immune response? If you get down to a certain size, are you more susceptible or less susceptible to a body's immune response?
Um, so this problem is it really depends on the body reacts on the antibodies that is present on the surface of these particles, and it is really worked out by these material approaches where people do particles, right, that is traveling inside the bloodstream. Um, so the biocompatibility part is really being worked out and being worked out now by a lot of people that are doing these small drug delivery systems. So we hope to collaborate and to work with them on this thing. But it's I don't think it will be a bottleneck at this point.
What about quantum effects? Once you scale down to a certain size, when you experience a lot of electron tunneling or other things that could confound the machine?
Yeah, that would be very, very nice, pleasant things to work in. It would mean that we would scale really, really down our electronics and that we would have to worry about this. Right now, it's really about the energy efficiency. You cannot dice your phone and send it inside the body, and because it won't, the electronics there, it won't simply work just because it's you need most of your phone is your battery, right? Most of the electrical vehicle is its battery, and so that's where we are now. We are really battling with this energy thirsty electronics, and so going into lower scale would be very, very cool.
Actually, why don't you? I don't know if this is a stretch, but I mean, all the cells in the body use glucose.
Yeah.
For energy, they use it, through the electron transport chain. Is it
Yeah.
possible you could have an onboard module that uses, glucose, so it
Yeah.
just takes the fuel that the body gets anyway, and that's its fuel source?
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, that's a great idea. Actually, it's a spoiler, but we are working on this now. So we are working on the number of modules, right, that would go on board of this our colloidal state machine, and one of this is battery that is powered by the solution and by the glucose and some other things. But this is very nice concept, right? Is that in the bloodstream, actually anywhere, even in water, there are solutions, and there are solutions being worked out how you can draw energy from the environment. And actually, now this question is being flipped up because basically your particle doesn't need to carry any energy inside of it because it swims in a bath of energy basically, and you just need to find a way how to harvest it, right, and how to uh, perform different functions about this using this power. So we are thinking about this in kind of tires. So where you have a particle that is continuously sensing the environment, right? It needs to be done, let's say, every 1 second, but it's really low energy requirements. But then sometimes you need the particle. Sometimes you need to have the signal being sent out to the sensor that, like you said, is being placed at your neck 4 millimeters away. But this requires much more energy, right? But what our particle can do, it can harvest maybe 1 to 3 hours, right? Accumulate the energy, and then will send the information in one burst. And then again, it's empty, it harvests energy, and again sends the information in one burst.
There's all kinds of chemical gradients and other gradients inside the body. So those, probably could be harvested.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, that's what we are thinking about.
It was really interesting. You got a lot of work ahead of you, but at least it's interesting work.
Yeah, we are really excited about this. The vision is great. Robotics is really something that will stay with us for the next 5 and 10 and so on years, and we believe things that won't change, right, is the things that we need to work on. And like after 10 years, people will be asking where are these smaller and smaller robots, And so that's what we are working and pushing the boundary on. And of course, swimming, like we call this autonomous probes, is one direction where we're going into the bloodstream and so on. But really, the other direction is to assemble these probes into the tissues, right, and artificial tissues, and having something that will operate like an arm, like a muscle, and so on. Because if you look now on the robots, people people try to do them very similar to, well, basically it's called centralized architecture, where you have some kind of actuator, and then you have a wires connected to this, and then you have a computer, right? And so whenever your actuator senses something, the signal goes through the wires into the computer computes, and then the signal goes back into the actuator, and then this actuator reacts in a certain way. If you look at nature, it operates in a completely different way, right? Your cells and your tissues have certain computation power in place, and only certain things are being transferred through neurons into the body. But a lot of things are being just reacted at place at the surface of your skin. And so what we are also working on is called the robotic materials concept. And so it's a concept of making these materials, these cells, into the tissues, where every cell would make certain computation at its own place, and only some crude big signal that needs to go into the let's say central nervous system needs to go there. But this will tremendously offload and will use these materials that are now just dumb actuators. Now they will be smart actuators, where you will have a lot of functions and a lot of things being built in this. And it turns out that this kind of architecture offsets, your power requirements, it offsets your size requirements. And so we are talking about this, even all the macro robots being much more energy efficient, being much more size efficient, and so forth. So this is another vision that we are having in mind.
So what's your timeline and what's your plan moving forward? Like, are you going to be able to get some of these devices to test in mice in the next few years, or how long is your timeline, and what are your milestones?
Yeah, so we are now expanding several capabilities. So our most immediate milestone is to have these power harvesting and integrating multiple bits of memory into the particles, and really having this tested into the mice and even pigs to really have, let's say, the profile of your digestive tract in terms of the pH or in terms of the blood content. Because one big problem that we see now is internal bleeding in the digestive tract, and it's very very hard to diagnose, but it has very immediate implications. So the doctor nowadays cannot really, if you come with a stomach ache to the doctor, but he cannot put your diagnosis whether you have internal bleeding or not. So this is one problem that we are currently want to think about, and we will be sending probes inside the animals maybe within a few years, and within the 5 years we hope to really have multiple sensors and to explore other directions of these probes, like building tissues. Yeah.
I would think it would be really important, though, that you don't leave sensors behind, because they could certainly accumulate over the lifetime of a creature. So I would think some kind of recall function and cleanup function would be super important, so you don't leave that debris.
Yeah. So we are working on this, and we have ideas there. Like, well, if you are talking about digestive tract, we are working on the ways how to really image these particles, so make sure that nobody stays behind. But when you think about digestive tract, they will be just excreted. So when you go to the toilet, you can just these particles will just fall out there, and The other way is to have biodegradable particles, and we have ideas there, and there are fields that are working on biodegradable materials. So let's say we can have particles that go into the digestive tract, operates there for several days, and then it basically dissolves itself.
Okay. Well, I guess in the future you'll be able to say, "I lost my phone," and you'll be able to joke and say, "How could you lose your phone? It's inside of you."
Yeah, yeah.
You know,
Yeah, definitely.
the bad nano machine joke, of the future. So.
We are very cognitive about this problem, and we are very cautious about this thing, putting something inside the body. So, really putting a lot of thoughts about this. And like I said, maybe the first trials will be going into the pipelines and in industry, because also that there is a big problem and there is a big need there. If you have, let's say, have a leaking pipeline, right, over thousands of miles, what people are currently doing is they have to manually drive their car and inspect every mile of their pipeline, or fly a drone in the best case. We hope to send these particles down the pipeline, and then you at the other end you capture them and you read out basically the position at which there was a leak, or there was a pickup of some analyte signal. So these are the other directions, and less sensitive, let's say, directions where we can test, build our platform, and then go inside the human body.
Well, very good. Well, yeah. Volodymyr, thanks for coming. What's the best way for people to see your work, pictures of it, and read papers, and maybe to interact with you? How can they get in touch?
Well, my email can be found online, and we have MIT featured the story about our work. Yeah, I don't know what's the usual ways people get contacted in this way.
Okay, well, people can Google you, but
yeah,
I think that the president of Ukraine is Volodymyr or something, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I Googled Volodymyr cell-sized machine, and that came up with the MIT article, and from there they could find you, or they could probably go to the MIT website.
Yeah,
those are some of the good ways.
Yeah, these are definitely good ways.
Okay. Well, thanks for coming, Volodymyr. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you very much for the conversation.
You're listening to the Future Tech Health Podcast with Richard Jacobs. Until I reached age 40, I never realized the obvious, that we all have medical issues, or we at least have a family member or close relation that has, or will have them in the future. Medicine and biological systems are the final frontier. Until we've conquered death, figured out how life began, cured cancer, and understood our purpose in the universe, there's a heck of a lot to talk about when it comes to our health. Future Tech Health means I'll be covering futuristic topics that are actually already in clinical trials, or even starting to appear on shelves or by prescription, or available for your own use. We dive deep into stem cells, CRISPR-Cas9, the science of sleep, epigenetics, medical testing, cancer, ketogenic diets, stem cells, aging, regenerative medicine, and more. My goal for you, the listener, is to learn from these podcasts. You may very well learn something that may change the course of your life for the better, steer you towards a new career, or give you insight into addressing a serious medical problem. Remember, however, this podcast and its content is informational in nature only. No medical, tax, legal, financial, or psychological advice is being given. If you enjoyed the podcast, please listen, subscribe, like, and share it with friends. Thank you.